In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is born. You know, today, as we hear this gospel reading once a year, I remember being a child and hearing it and wondering, why do we have to hear this gospel reading with all these names of people that I didn't know back then? Some of them we still don't know, and we hear it every year the Sunday before Christmas. Well, the reason for it is simple. It's to put Christ in context of the history of the fathers of the Old Testament. You know, it's very interesting that many of us in our homes have pictures of our parents, or our wedding pictures, our children, our great-grandparents, as a reminder to us of our history. Some people even have in their homes a little tree with different branches, and it has the names and towns where people came from, to place them in history so that they know where they're at as far as their family lineage. However, in the Bible, many times we hear names that are put out and we don't really have a chronological timetable in our heads of when things happen. So we see today that there's 28 generations that happened prior to the birth of Christ. And through that 28 generations, there's a lineage that is unbroken from David the king all the way back to Abraham. But it's very interesting, too, that the church tells us of this as kind of the verbal tree of heritage for Christ, to put him in a timetable before it says, this is how the birth of Christ happened. So for some, it might seem redundant or pointless to hear the names. However, that is the preamble to the birth of Christ, because without it, it is just a historical event that really has no setting in the history of the church. But one other thing I wanted to bring to your attention today is the understanding of Christmas. And we see so many things. We see the Christmas trees, we see holly, we see mistletoe, we see red and green. We see all these things as far as colors in the church and symbols in the church that I think it's important to explain one hymn today that might help these things to make better sense to you. The Christmas tree, which we have right here, is not an original Christian symbol. It is a pagan symbol. And the day of the 25th is also a pagan holiday that was celebrated, which was the Feast of Lights before the time of Christ. So what we had before the time of Christ is people worshipped all different kinds of things. If you think about it, American Indian had a very special place for the earth and for the sun, for rain, for all those things. But likewise, in the early times prior to Christ, people worshipped stars. And we still see that with astrologists, and we see it in newspapers. We see the readings and all those kinds of things, that people still follow that. And even in the practice of witchcraft, we see that they use stars as their fortune telling. So Christ comes and he is born. Was he born on December 25th? Absolutely not. When was he born? He was probably born in the springtime somewhere, because we have the understanding of the taxes. We have the understanding that all those, at that time, what does the gospel say? That there was a edict that was sent out to all the people that everyone should be taxed. So, if you were a greedy emperor or Caesar at the time, when would you tax? When the animals have their offspring. Because who wants to tax an animal that is waiting to breed as one that would already have done its offspring, where you could get a lot more money for all the sheep and all the other offspring that your animals would have. So when does that usually occur? Usually occurs in the springtime. So we have a context of the time of Christmas being somewhere not in this time, not in December. We don't know the exact time, but we do know that it was not December 25th. So what we do know is, we have many times in the church, in the history of the church, Christ has taken the understanding of paganism, he's taken the understanding of Judaism, and has transformed that into Christianity. He's taken some of those things and transformed them into Christian symbols. So why do we celebrate on December 25th? Because it's the Feast of Lights in the pagan holiday, but it's been transformed by Christianity to become the Feast of Light of Christ, the light of Christ. How do we know this, and how do we know that Father Peter's not making this up? Well, I'm going to read to you the hymn of Christmas, the Apolitikion. It says, "Your nativity, O Christ our God, has dawned upon the world." So right there is the reference to light, has dawned upon the world. "The light of knowledge, for thereby those who worship the stars by a star, the Star of Bethlehem, were taught to worship you, the only Son of righteousness." Now this is one of those play of words that I had mentioned a few weeks ago. Son of righteousness is not S-O-N, it's spelled S-U-N. So, it's a reference again to the Son being the Son of God and the actual sun in the sky. So, they taught, by a star, you taught them to adore you, the Son of righteousness, and you to know as the sunrise from on high, glory to you. So how many references is that? It's about 4 or 5 references to light, to sun, to the sunrise, to dawn, to show that the church has taken that feast of lights where those who worship the stars are now taught to worship Christ. So the Christmas tree that we see was also part of that festival of lights that they had, but it's been transformed into the tree symbolizing something more than just the pagan symbols, something symbolizing the birth of Christ. So we see all these symbols in the church. We see even the symbols of red and green, which are very unique in iconography. We see that the Virgin Mary has green and red. Christ has red and green also, and it's a reverse. So we see that green has symbolized the earth, and red has symbolized divine. So the Virgin Mary was born from the earth. That's why she has it underneath. She was clothed with the divine through the birth of Christ. Christ was divine first. That's why he has the red underneath. And he was clothed with his human nature on the outside. So we see that the red and green as being symbols in the church, and something that we also see in Christmas. We see the red, we see the green, we see all these beautiful colors. But the church has taken so many things and transformed them into being Christian symbols. So we see at this time of the year, and especially at Christmas, that the church in its wisdom has taken such a beautiful hymn like this and reminds us that we shouldn't be staring up at the sky, worshiping and expecting the stars to line up to help us, but we should be looking to Christ, who is the sun that never sets. That's why we face east in the church as well. We face east expecting the sun to rise on that day when Christ comes back and will never set. We don't face west. No Orthodox church faces west because that is a sign of the darkness. The darkness sets in the west. So we look to Christ as being that light that shines upon us. So this Christmas, think of these things, and if you have, I know everybody has this book in their pew, to take it and to read it, and even if you want to borrow it, I will let you borrow this from the pew if you would like to take this home, so that on Christmas Day, when you say your prayers before you eat, you can open to page 41, and you can read number 80, and it speaks about that hymn, and to discuss that maybe with your children, or just to say it nice and slow. So many times in the church we say things so rote. We say the Lord's Prayer, and we don't have time to sit and contemplate and digest those things. But to take this beautiful hymn and to read it and to study it and to break it apart so that you can glean the beautiful messages that are there. I pray that this beautiful time of the birth of Christ continues to renew in each and every one of you, and that this hymn, as we go through the rest of the service today, the rest of the liturgy, that you think about Christ and how He is the sun and all the good things that come from the sun. Warmth, the growth for the whole world. And without the sun, we would be nothing. And it was very interesting. Last night I flipped on the Learning Channel for a second, and I forget what his name is. One of the newscasters was talking about Yellowstone Park and the super volcanic eruption that's going to happen someday, and it's going to be like an ice age to the world. And the whole thing that they were talking about is that if the sun is blocked, as it was during the prior ice ages, that the world will freeze within days. And without the sun shining upon us in that perfect blend of the distance of the sun and the rotation of the earth and all the other things in nature lining up, that we're dead. We're either scorched or we're frozen. And likewise in our life in the church, our spiritual life, at the end, we're either going to be scorched or we're going to be embraced by God and feel the warmth of God and that warm embrace. And, many times we think of Hades and not being in heaven as being burnt. And we say, oh, you're going to burn, or this is going to burn, or, those kinds of things. As in jest, we say them. However, many have written that Hades is the place where it's cold and in the absence of the embrace of God. And if you think about it, as a child, as a parent, what is more comforting than the embrace of a spouse, of a child, of a parent? What is more comforting than that? And what do you receive from that? You receive not only the warmth from the heart, but also that physical warmth as well. So let the sun, the S-U-N of righteousness, Christ our God, continue to warm you and strengthen you throughout this Christmas season. Amen.